Hello, I'm Julie Williams of Migration Down Under, and I'm going to be talking to you about parent visas. Because you've got your visa and now you'd like to have your parents here, because the separation from anywhere from Australia is quite a distance, and even though it's nice to be independent, it's also good to have your parents close by. So there's a couple of different options for parents. You've got the basic parent visa, the contributory or the non-contributory. The basic eligibility to be able to bring your parents over is if you meet the balance of family test. Now, the balance of family is making certain that you've got your parents have the balance or the majority of their children living and residing in Australia on a permanent basis as either permanent residents or Australian citizens. So that also includes if your parents have remarried and you're sponsoring perhaps your mother or your father and then their partner, so your stepfather or stepmother. You also have to include your step-parents' children as well. So sometimes that may tip it over, and unfortunately then for you it means that you can't actually sponsor your parents if you don't have the majority living here in Australia. It's either the equal number or the majority. So often if there's only two of you, if you've only got one sibling, then it's very easy, you meet the balance. But if you've got more than two and you're the only one living here, then unfortunately for you, you're not going to be able to sponsor your parents on a parent visa. So let me talk through the contributory and the non-contributory. So basically the difference between the two is the cost and also, the time frame. So the non-contributory, whilst it is the basic fee and it's not an exorbitant fee, it's the basic application fee, it does take a long time for the department to process this. And the reason being is because this type of application is capped, so they only grant a certain number each financial year. And then the popularity of it. There's so many people wanting to have their parents out here, so the volume far exceeds the number of applications or the number of grants they have each year. On the website, I think the department's quoting sort of 20 plus years for the processing time, and 20 plus years is a long time. So to be able to wait for your parents to come out. In reality, at the moment, we've got parents who are getting their visas done through non-contributory after about 8 or 10 years. But that's for those that have lodged them 8 or 10 years ago. We can't guarantee that's going to be the same time frame if you lodge it now in 2017. So and to lodge it offshore, a non-contributory, often there's really no point unless your parents are very, very young, and in 20 years' time they're going to be 60, 65 and ready to, retire and come out to Australia and live full-time, and so they can afford to wait that length of time. There is another option for non-contributory if they have the ability to come on shore, and if they are 65 and over, then there could be a possibility. I say could be because there's a lot of each individual has certain expectations and certain restrictions. So there is a possibility that you can lodge a non-contributory onshore if you're 65 and older, and then are happy to wait that full period of time. Unfortunately, unlike any other permanent residency application you apply for, parent visa applications don't allow you to access Medicare until the permanent residency has been granted. So that's one thing you've got to consider if you've got parents that are 65 and over, and they're not going to have access to Medicare, that they've got adequate health insurance or funds to be able to support themselves. The other things with parents, you've got to make sure that they are in good health, because they do need to meet the health criteria at the time of decision, and also at the time that they're being placed on a queue. because with the non-contributory parent applications, whilst they may take many years for them to be processed, the initial assessment by a case officer is, generally speaking at the moment, done within 12 to 18 months of lodgement. So you need to be able to meet the health and character at that time of initial assessment to make certain that they are eligible to go on the queue. And then once on the queue, they wait there for the next 10, 20 years or however long it really is going to take. And then again, at that time of decision, the case officer will request further medicals. So I guess we can't guarantee a person's health and how they're going to be in 10, 20 years' time when a decision is being made. So that's just something that you need to be consider and be aware of. The contributory visa, that is currently taking at the moment about 2 years from lodgement until a case officer is ready to assess. That could reduce or it could take longer. It just depends on demand. It depends on the number of case officers handling the application as to whether that time frame will increase or not. But with the contributory parent visa, whilst they lodge the application and pay the standard fees, once they have met all that criteria of family balance and character, health, having an assurance of support, then they are requested to pay the larger sum. Currently it's $43,600 per person, but that can change. That's at the time we're recording this. From the 1st of July it may increase. And that is not requested until the case officer is satisfied that you meet all the criteria. So that's the good news, that you're not going to lodge and pay all this money, and then if it is refused or you don't meet the criteria for some reason, that you're going to lose all that money. And a lot of people often ask, why is it so expensive? I mean, it does sound quite exorbitant, especially when you've got two parents and you're paying the deposit, the bond of $10,000 for the first applicant, $4,000 for the second, that you're looking at $100,000, and that is a lot of money. But the reason for it is because once they are a permanent resident, they have all the access to our health system, free health system, and other entitlements that Australian citizens and permanent residents have worked all their life to obtain and paid taxes throughout their lifetime. So I guess what the government is saying, that $43,600 is to offset the taxes that an Australian resident or citizen has paid. So therefore you're helping to contribute in some way to the government health system to enable your parents to be able to access the health. So I guess from that perspective, it is fair, even though it is a lot of money. And the thing is too, if the parents are still young, they will have full work rights once they do obtain that permanent residency application. So there is an option there to continue working, so they can perhaps make up the costs that they have paid. There's also another option for the contributory parent visa, if you're not wanting to pay that full amount up front, that you lodge an application for a provisional visa to start with, and then in 2 years from the grant of that provisional visa, they then lodge the final payment to obtain permanent residency. So basically, it's giving you an option to pay that large amount in 2 stages. And usually how it's broken up is 2/3 of it up front for the provisional visa, which then gives them their full work rights and access to Medicare, etc. And then within 2 years of that grant of the provisional visa, pay the balance, which is generally a third of that final amount. And that sometimes makes it easier because I can appreciate, it is a large amount of money. With the parent visas for offshore applications, there is no age restriction. However, if they happen to be onshore and decide to lodge an application here in Australia, one of the applicants, the main applicant, must be at minimum 65 years of age at the time of application. So if you've got both mum and dad applying, as long as the main applicant is 65, they don't have to be both 65 or older. Otherwise, offshore, no age restriction at all. In regards to health and character and what they have to do, with health, they have to go through the same medical examination as everyone else does for permanent residency. They need to either go to the approved or authorised panel physician offshore, or go through Bupa visa medicals here in Australia. And there unfortunately is no health waiver for parent visa applications. So if one of them doesn't meet the health criteria, then one fails, both fail, unfortunately. So despite you perhaps saying, oh look, they're covered under health insurance, we're happy to pay any fees, we'll cover all medicals, if they don't meet the health criteria, then unfortunately they're not going to obtain the visa. Character is the same as everybody else that's applying for permanent residency. You have to be of good character. So you need to be able to provide police clearances from every country you've lived in for in the last 10 years for 12 months or more, and show that you haven't got a serious criminal record. And also there's, it depends on the nature of the criminal record, if you do have one, as to whether you'll meet the the character criteria or not. In regards to sponsors, who can sponsor a parent, then the sponsor is generally the child of the parent, and that sponsor has to be a permanent resident or an Australian citizen residing permanently. So you can't just be a permanent resident or citizen and not living in Australia. So you need to show that you have been living in Australia for a reasonable amount of time, and reasonable is usually considered to be about 2 years. There are waivers to that depending on the circumstances and your individual situation as to whether it can be slightly less than 2 years. Now, as far as assurance of support, every parent must have a guarantor or assurance of support prior to the decision of the application being made, and that is generally generally the applicant's child, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So whilst the sponsor is the child of the applicant, the assurance of support doesn't have to be. It just needs to be somebody that is in full-time employment and has adequate means to be able to show that they can go guarantor to the parent and put up the bond. Although the assurance of support person is not generally the person that is supplying the money, that usually comes from the parent applicant themselves.